This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Welcome to the Fatigue Fixer podcast. Ever wonder why it feels like the entire sisterhood is just so darn exhausted? We're diving deep into everything from those sneaky physical culprits, think iron levels playing hide and seek or a moody thyroid, to the mental weights of always being on and that sneaky urge to please everyone. And let's not forget society's oh-so-high bar that we're tirelessly trying to reach. I'm Dr. Sarah Vadebonkar, your guide on this energy-finding mission. As a naturopathic doctor with over a decade of experience, I've been piecing together the fatigue puzzle, asking why so many incredible women around me, including my patients, often feel like they're running on empty. So pull up a chair or perhaps pop in your headphones and head out for a walk. Together we'll uncover those hidden, surprising, and sometimes even downright unexpected reasons behind that lingering tiredness. Ready to recharge those batteries? All right, deep breath. Let's jump into today's insightful episode. It's a man's world. You've probably heard that phrase before, and let's be honest, you've probably felt it too. From the time we were young girls, we watched the world around us molded by masculine structures. So what did we do? We adapted. We started pushing ourselves, studying hard to get straight A's, trying to get picked to be the captain of the volleyball team, or maybe that was just me. We picked up the pace, chasing after our goals, ticking off that never-ending to-do list. We raised our hands and took on roles, responsibilities, and expectations, often feeling like we had to prove ourselves to succeed. Here's the thing. All of that doing, striving, and decision-making has made us really good at one thing: living in our masculine. Today's episode is the one where you've been acting like a man, and I'm going to share with you, dear listener, why dominating in your masculine is probably making you tired, overwhelmed, resentful in your relationship, and struggling to actually sit down, relax, like actually relax, let alone accept somebody's help. Today's guest is my friend, fellow naturopathic doctor, owner of the Poppy Clinic, creator of the Wild Collective, and wild woman herself, Dr. Michelle Peris. Michelle first introduced me to the idea of the divine feminine, and I remember at the time thinking, what type of woo-woo shit is this? And I love woo-woo shit, but this was a new language I had not heard, and I didn't really know what it meant, but I was open. And I'm so glad I stayed open, because learning how to tap into my divine feminine has been an absolute game changer in my life, my health, and my relationship. And that's why I want to share this idea with you. So if you're cringing a little bit right now, if you're not really sure what the heck we're talking about, I'm going to invite you to hang tight and just hear us out. I have no doubt that by the end of this conversation, you'll be wanting to tap into your feminine energy. Michelle, welcome to the Fatigue Fixer podcast.
I'm so happy to be here, my friend.
Thank you.
Happy to trigger people a little bit more.
I know, me too. That's why I invited you. And I was like, if we're going to do a podcast, we're going to have good conversations, not just the same shit everyone else is talking about. So
that's right.
My first question is, when did you first realize that you were acting like a man? Because we all know that we have a tendency, you and I have both kind of admitted, we have a tendency to dominate in our masculine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I don't think I fully understood what that meant. It's been layered for me to fully understand how much I reside in my masculine energy versus my feminine. And I think, the lens I want to really preface this is this lifelong journey I've now gone in understanding this better is that we're really meant to find harmony within ourselves with these both polarities. So we can talk about that as it goes on. But when did I first discover how much I live in my masculine? I mean, beyond the things that you just said, always achieving, always checking things off the to-do list. It was the first time I was introduced to something vastly different is when I got into the book, Women Who Run with Wolves. And it was this concept of this divine feminine, this wild woman. And I'll say something deep inside of me like twinged, like, what is that? Who is she? And how do I reclaim her? And I think those questions are really what brought me on a new pursuit of working with women in a different capacity, because I not only felt like myself, that was something that was totally bankrupt and I felt disconnected from, but the women I also served were high achieving, perfectionistic doers who sacrificed themselves in the pursuit of making everybody else happy or getting all the things done. And since that moment of discovery, I was quite honest when we started the Wild Collective. I had no idea what I was talking about when I said divine feminine, not a clue. It was a total blind spot. I had no idea what I was saying. I just had a level of humility and curiosity, or I was like, let's figure this out together, because it sounds like something we should all be interested in. Because when you have a visceral reaction to that kind of truth, you're like, ooh, that's interesting. That has depth to it. And I don't know why I feel this way, but I feel this way. And I'll say I doubled down on my curiosity when I started to have whispers of these kind of conversations when I felt brave enough in a wild circle. And then I noticed everyone was like, no, let's talk about this. So I think this is a huge blind spot. I think, and we can go there however you want to go there, but I think the way we grew up and what we looked as markers of success inadvertently pulled us from our innate divine feminine wisdom, and therefore a lot of feminine aspects of ourself, and this is in men and women, we consider we consider lazy. And so we deny these parts of ourselves to the point where they become so foreign, and then we just start achieving. And most of us don't even know why we're working so hard, like for what? And then we finally get to the marker of success, quote unquote. And then we're like, I'm no happier. I think I'm actually broken. And it's interesting because one of the conversations that's come up in our community as of recently is like, what really started to land for women is that they're like, I have accomplished a lot. I have a lot of things I'm really proud of. And the thing that feels so unfulfilled inside of me is that my feminine side is not expressed. And that feels like a slow death, if I'm being pretty honest.
I agree with you, Michelle. And I think so many of us, just the way, like you said, that we were taught to succeed was in these very masculine ways. So if you're listening to this and you're starting to wonder, like, am I in my masculine? There is a simple test that I love to ask women. It's a simple question that I find will really quickly help you understand how you relate to your divine feminine and whether you access her. And it's basically to think about how you react when someone gives you a compliment or offers to pay for you. Because most of us struggle immensely with those things, right? If we get a compliment, we either brush it off, we minimize it, or we feel the need to like shoot a compliment right back. Or if someone offers to pay or help with something, like so many of us struggle to accept that. And that ability to receive is such a key part of being in your divine feminine, right? To be able to receive help, to receive compliments, to receive someone buying you lunch. And most of us are terrible at receiving, which I find is like a simple way just to start to access this. So Michelle, can you help us better understand the difference between the masculine and the feminine? So I want to start by prefacing this with saying that every human has both the masculine and feminine energies within them. And depending probably on your gender, depending on the kind of work you do, depending on how you show up in the world, you probably dominate in one more than the other. Now, I think it's important for us to state that neither is good or bad. They both have good qualities and they can both turn less positive. But ideally, you want to be flowing in and out of both and using them when they're needed and finding some kind of balance between them. So what are some of the qualities of the feminine or the divine feminine?
Well, I think your one question really did a good job of defining that. Is really at our polarities, the feminine is the capacity to surrender and receive, and the masculine is to produce and provide.
Yeah.
And so, I think when we are in a society that celebrates achieving, we look at achievement and doing and grinding and growing and scaling and to-do lists and all of those pieces. Those are very masculine qualities. Feminine qualities are, to rest, is to surrender, to trust, to have faith, to it. And here's the thing I think is so important, is that the reason that we got so fascinated with this topic in our community were there unintended consequences of the feminist movement, which sounds like one of the most triggering things you could possibly say. And I get that. So just sit with me for a minute. And just like you said, neither is good nor bad. I think you set the tone for this conversation very importantly, is that they are equal, but they are not the same. And it's understanding and discerning the power in both and finding how to flex both of those powers and those energies within ourselves, but then also learn how to relate to our partners, whether in business or in life, to create some harmony within these polarities. Because where we start to see a lot of friction in ourselves and in our partnerships is when these polarities are not balancing each other out. And we can talk about that in a minute. But in essence, we are both in a waltz. This is the picture I like. Mm-hmm. We're both doing a dance, but the role of the masculine and the role of the feminine are distinctly different. They are equal. They are both important. They are both powerful, but they are different. So one is creating safe containment. They are the producer. They are the provider. They are the doing. And the other is the beauty, the creativity, the rest, the surrender, the flow. So there's this beautiful duality that exists within ourselves, within our partnerships. And I feel like we would have a lot more harmonious partnerships if we understood this, but then also learned how to discover it within ourselves to feel peaceful on our own.
And I think part of why so many of us struggle with that, like those feminine qualities, like you said, number one, they are deemed by many people in our society as laziness. And part of that is, and I want to talk more about the feminist movement, is that what we were sold as feminism is that anything a man can do, like I can do bleeding, like I can do it just as well as you. And that opened up a lot of doors, and that allowed us to advance in many different ways. But it also meant that in order to succeed, we had to fit ourselves into the mold that had already been created for the vast majority by men. And part of that is that most men have to operate on a 24-hour clock, right? They are working from 9 to 5 or whatever the case is. And so we were trying to fit ourselves into that mold. And part of how most men succeed is by pushing and striving and using qualities that are, again, not inherently good nor bad, but we had to really adopt and fit ourselves into that in order to succeed. And I think one of the costs is that we ended up like suppressing or ignoring these more feminine things. So why do you think nowadays, why is it so hard for us to trust that part of ourselves or to allow that part of us to be seen or felt?
Because there's intergenerational imprinting, if you will. I know we're going way sideways. If you're not into esoteric, welcome. I get it. But because there's a narrative that we've been holding. And as you were saying that, Sarah, the word I wrote is that we abandoned our power to, link to another type of power. And neither is wrong. The thing is like, masculine is what helps us get stuff done. It's so important. It's like, it's what provides, the to-do list. Like those are key components. The reason why so many of us are burnt out is that we don't make room for rest at all. Like we don't allow time for reprieve, which is your whole jam, right? But I think there's so many reasons why this is not exercised or a muscle we've flexed is that it's just long forgotten. You know, I think the idea of being equal, which we definitely deserved to be, was so advantageous. There were so many things that happened at the time of women's liberation. There were so many things happening that we actually, even if you go looking for the literature on divine feminine, masculine, it's kind of hard to find because this is a new age phenomenon of us not having this intact for ourselves. But because of the mothers who raised us, we were brought up in a world where we were chasing one marker of success and we abandoned other parts of ourselves. And when you haven't flexed a muscle in a while, it takes a while to rediscover those parts of ourselves. And we're not having these kinds of conversations. In fact, the reason why this could be considered such triggering content is that it sounds like we're not grateful to be equal. And that's not at all what we're saying. It's like, how do we rediscover our power and own our strengths and honor the strengths in the masculine as well?
Yeah. And like you said, I think so many of us did achieve quote unquote success. And like you said, we get there and we look around and we're like, number one, is this it? Like, this is what I worked my ass off for? Because I'm not really that much happier or fulfilled. And also like, kind of what now? Like, this is what I thought I wanted. And now I'm here and I'm not really that happy. And I think that's where we can start to look at, are there other ways of doing things? And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is, like you said, when we dominate in our masculine and we don't balance it out with time in our feminine, which is the rest, it's the reprieve, like you said, that is partly why we are all so tired and exhausted, and why I was just trying to think like 43% of people are reporting that they feel burnt out right now in the Canadian workforce. Like, we are so good at giving energy, and we are not very good at doing the things that are going to help replenish and put energy back into our system. And I think that's what has been so powerful for me about this type of, work that you've brought into my life, is that it has, tapping into my divine feminine has really allowed me to rest without feeling guilty, to take breaks, and to not constantly have my foot pressed 100% against the gas pedal every moment of every day, which has made a huge difference for my energy. And I also want to talk about the relationship piece, because that is where that was the aha moment for me. So I was sitting in a conference beside our mutual friend, Leah Saunders, and the speaker was talking about the masculine and feminine. And she talked about when you're in your masculine and you come home to your male partner and you're still dominating in your masculine, you're either forcing them into their feminine or you're going to cause massive repulsion. And so let's talk about this concept of polarity that you've mentioned a few times. And the way that I think of polarity is I always think about magnets, right? If you put the two ends of the magnet that are the same, they will repel each other. When you take the opposite sides of the magnet, that's where you get that strong kind of pulling force together. And I think that's what can be possible with the masculine and the feminine, is that when they kind of come together, there is this really strong connecting force. So tell me what you see, especially in the women that you're working with in the Wild Collective, like when they're dominating in their masculine, how does that show up for them in their relationships?
Yeah, for a good part of them, they can only attract a feminine counterpart, feminine energy counterpart. Mm-hmm. So here's why this is such an important part of reclaiming our energy and feeling like powerful and fulfilled in our life, because if what you're doing is working, keep going. But the reality is with polarities, you can only attract the opposite. Those energies have to harmonize. So one person is always going to be in the sort of alpha or dominant role and can't attract another dominant role. They would repel each other, to the point of what you just said. So if women are out in the world and they are executing in their masculine, they are likely to only be able to attract a more feminine man. Now, again, or partner, those polarities you're always harmonizing with that person because it can always shift. It's always in motion. But for sake of understanding, that is what's happening. And so what we were seeing, and I think why this took off by storm, is that there are a lot of women who are executing in their masculine and are feeling repulsed by their male counterparts because they want to feel safe. They want their feminine to be expressed, but they are so strongly in their masculine that they've created a polarity. And we can talk about why that feminine power is so powerful, because I think this is a really important reframe at the end. But they end up in relationships where they're not actually attracted to their partner anymore. And so talk about a day-to-day stressor that affects your overall quality of life. And that's the thing, is like, if you're going and you're achieving and you're doing all these things and you're supposed to get all this fulfillment, but you're not connected to the person that you're spending most of your time with, you have a problem. You have a serious problem that you feel very unfulfilled. And this is when we're talking about like root cause medicine. I think these are huge obstacles to overcome in terms of our health and reclaiming our energy and feeling thriving. And I think it's why you preface this kind of conversation, because it can be triggering. You know, if what you're doing is working, then keep going. Perhaps you like having that polarity in your relationship. But if you're feeling on some level unfulfilled with how that relationship is working and your level of attraction to that person, then you might want to look at how you're showing up and how masculine qualities are showing up in your partnership, and how by harnessing more of those feminine qualities can help them stand up in their leadership and create a new kind of harmony.
Yeah. How I see this playing out in sometimes in my relationship, and certainly in the women that I work with, is that when we say that you're showing up at home in your masculine, what that looks like is that you are in charge of all the decision making. You are probably controlling most of what is happening at home. You are running the show. And when
you actually don't think they can do it any better.
Exactly. And by doing that, you make your partner useless. You make them irrelevant because you don't trust that they can do it. And they assume a role where they're like, well, what the hell's the point of trying? Because she's just going to think I did it wrong or it's not good enough. So I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch golf, which then forces you to continue to be masculine, because now you're like, he doesn't fucking do anything. He's useless. He's this, he's that. And so when we dominate in our masculine, in our relationships, we often render our partners useless. And like Michelle said, then we're not attracted. Who wants to have sex with a useless person? Nobody does. So it creates this massive rift in our relationships. It causes so much resentment, which we're going to do a whole episode about resentment. So if you have some of that, hang tight, it's coming. And then we wonder why we're so miserable in our relationships, and why our partners aren't stepping up, and why they're not helping more, and why they're not offering. But we've created this dynamic that makes it really hard for them to do that. And then we're exhausted because we're trying to do all the things and there's no space for anybody to help.
Yeah. And oftentimes, like you've probably seen this, like, why do I date the same kind of guy over and over again, right? We have patterns. We're all patterning out on each other, right? So if your partner, was very mothered by their mom, and then you become a mother, this is happening in our community a lot, they get really excited to have that mother archetype back. And so it's like, oh, she's a mother. She might be my child's mother, but it is really nice to have this motherly archetype in the home running the show.
Who's going to make my lunch and do my laundry and make sure everything is taken care of so that I don't have to do it? Like, that's what you're talking about?
100%. And then we have resentful women who don't understand
man-child.
Yeah, don't know how this happened. And it's like, well, if we understood about polarities, which is why this conversation is so important, Sarah, so I'm so grateful for you putting this forward. It's like, if we understood how this was playing in our relationships, we would be able to take our power back and start looking at this from a very like critical, non-judgmental place. Like, how did this happen? You know how we feel mystified by our health? We also feel mystified by our relationships. Like, when I met you, like I was so attracted to you. Books I've read talks about falling into your default polarity, right? So talking about men who were maybe really smothered by their mothers, right? They default into that polarity. Whereas if you were someone who, you know, and innately loved how someone, you know, did all the planning and took you on dates and it was like just so wonderful, but then things get comfortable and then your polarity, your default polarity comes out to play. And now you start taking over and doing all the things and then basically emasculating your partner and think that they can't do it as good as you. And so why would they try? Mm-hmm. Who feels good about being criticized? Like nobody. So, okay, you just do it. Right. And so then we end up in these really dysfunctional relationships and we feel mystified by them. And that is a huge barrier to feeling well in our body. It is a huge energy leak. It's incredibly exhausting beyond the actual logistical like tasks that need to be done. It's also an emotional drain. And I think we're both on this pursuit of helping women feel like so powerful in their body. And as a result, don't apologize for seeking pleasure and loving their partner and feeling very attracted to the work and their impact and to their partner and all of these wonderful things that come as a consequence of making yourself your own magnificent obsession and getting your polarities in check, right? Like, and the thing is about learning that there's this harmony within ourselves and in our partners. It's like, okay, anyone in a leadership role obviously is going to have to take on some masculine qualities. So at work, the work that I do is incredibly masculine. But how can I come home and start to reclaim my feminine with my partner and allow him to rise in that role and us relate to each other in an entirely new way that restores our polarity and helps our attraction to each other?
Yeah.
Right.
So for the woman who's listening, who's probably having the same aha moment that you and I had of, oh shit, I'm totally dominating in my masculine, especially at home. Like, how do we start to reclaim the feminine? Because part of what I think we're not suggesting is that we're not saying you're going back to being a 1950s housewife, because Michelle and I would both be miserable and feel terribly in that. And we don't want that for you unless that's what you want. Yeah. Like, how does the modern woman who is going to probably need to dominate in her masculine at work, like, how does she start to let that feminine part of her get reclaimed? Because it's in there. Like, we all have it. How do we start to like unleash it?
Well, I think that's why you're acknowledging, if you're probably having that aha moment, you're feeling that visceral truth that Sarah and I both felt like, oh my gosh, I have to unpack this. This is very curious to me. Yeah. I think that's my obsession with with looking at like, how do we romance our own life? It's this feminine beauty romance piece. So like, how do you self-nurture, self-mother yourself? How do you self-husband yourself? How do you care and nurture for yourself so that you can show up more powerfully, however that looks for you? So I think it's, you know, reclaiming our voice, learning to say no when we actually mean no instead of being the good girl. I think it's, you know, I think when we're looking at our partners, this is a bigger conversation, but it's how can we acknowledge the champion in them and celebrate when they are contributing? So, because here's the thing. At our core, if we're talking about our wounds and our biggest fears, what they say, you know, who talks about this a lot, the people who talk about this is, you know, a man's biggest fear is that he will be humiliated, and a woman's biggest fear is that she will be killed. And so the masculine is the protector, the provider, and the feminine is the protector of the image of their partner, right? So how can you help them show up for you more powerfully? Well, maybe you ask for help and then you let them help. And then instead of criticizing what they did because they didn't do it like you actually praise and you express gratitude for the fact that they're helping you because they really do just want to provide and make you happy. It's mind-blowing that that's actually what the masculine is. Their pursuit is to make the feminine pleased. Mm-hmm. That is the truth. So how do we support them and celebrate them in their contribution instead of criticizing and tearing them down because they didn't do it like you? So I think there's two things, is that we learn to flex our own feminine. So where can you provide a little more rest and reprieve and creativity in your day, right? Is it starting a little slower? Is it taking an art class on the weekend? Is it having a bath? Like whatever. That's a flex in the feminine. And then it's also being able to use your voice and asking for what you need and then expressing gratitude for when that is provided, even if it's not to your standards. We all have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
It does. And one of the things that you teach very early on in the Wild Collective, which for me was like a gateway into this divine feminine, is around cyclical living. So do you find that could be a good kind of stepping stone as well for women for tapping back into the feminine?
You were probably trying to prime me to answer it that way. Yes. That's absolutely such a beautiful thing. So as we're on this journey of reclaiming the divine feminine, it's understanding that we are not circadianly driven. Yes, we have cortisol and melatonin that work in that 24-hour clock, just like biological men do, but we have a more intricate infradian rhythm happening here, which is our menstrual cycle and how tied we are to the moon cycle, and really understanding that we are distinctly different at each phase of the menstrual cycle. And so when we start to get curious about this and understanding that we were actually designed to not only produce, like you were saying, I would be so miserable if I'm not talking about quitting my job and letting, like, not have, being at home, that wouldn't work for me. But how can I show up more in my feminine as I can start to honor my menstrual cycle and understand where I'm at and know that there is a time for me to be, producing and showing up in the world and pitching new ideas and innovating and leading. But then there's also a time to come home to myself, to rest, to reflect on what's working, what's not working, to, really get intuitive with where I'm supposed to be at and allowing time for rest and not forcing all the time. And when we understand that there's this beautiful innate wisdom that we were built, that was built for us by our hormone cycle, we can reconcile and start to recalibrate to a different way of living and start to build out our life entirely on our menstrual wisdom, which I think is so powerful.
It is really powerful. And I think one of the kind of aspects of the divine feminine is being more connected to nature and both nature's cycles and our own cycles. And that's why I think this is such a beautiful entry point for women who are like, okay, I'm realizing I'm very masculine. I'm open to exploring the feminine thing. And this, I think, can be a great way to do that. Can we chat about energy specifically? What's happening to a woman's energy throughout the 4 different phases of her menstrual cycle?
Yeah, I love that question. So when let's start from the beginning. So in that menstrual phase, this is when we're shedding our uterine lining. This is when our energy is at its absolute lowest. Our hormones are at their lowest. We actually have greater communication between both sides of our brain hemispheres, which is why this is such an intuitive time. So notice if you start dreaming around this time. I've noticed now that this is so connected that if I over scheduling in that menstrual phase, I will shoot out of bed with anxiety. My body's literally saying you have to stop this, because I'm always fighting my natural masculine tendency, right? So this is a time where we are meant to be so introspective. We call it the winter. It's hibernation. It is when we are supposed to honor that if we don't feel like doing anything, we don't force. Maybe stretching is the most movement, or a walk, right? Like that's all your body can actually handle. And when you actually start honoring that, it's amazing how wonderful your body can feel, and you can have less symptomatic experiences the rest of the month as a result to having tuned into your body so well. And next, after that menstrual phase, we get into the follicular phase. And this is when all of our hormones start to naturally rise, especially estrogen in particular. We tend to feel better. We tend to have more energy. This is when we are, very creative. We have a lot more energy to do, so we can push our body a little bit more, especially with fitness, or, if you have things that you really need to get done in your career or in your day. This is a really great time to be identifying what's important to you, what are your values, and what you're going to do about that. And you will have the vitality in order to be able to handle all of the things. So I always say, like, one thing that I've really learned to honor with a menstrual cycle, and I'll continue, is if there's something that's very triggering to me, one, I pay attention to when I'm getting triggered. Is it in my luteal phase, which we'll get to in a minute, but I don't make decisions, or I don't act on everything immediately anymore. I really now give myself the space and breath to trust that the answer and the real reason I'm triggered will come to me at the right time. When we start to honor our body, it's amazing what wisdom comes from us without having to go into the outside world and asking for help all the time, right? You don't necessarily need a sounding board for everything. I'm obviously about community, so I do think discernment and community is essential. But when we can really start to trust ourselves, like, why was I so bothered by that? Was it because I'm actually, overextending myself, or did someone actually say something that hurt my feelings? I now give myself permission to chew on that. I don't immediately act anymore, because I know that the answer will come to me. The truth will come to me in the right time. After that follicular phase, we move into that ovulatory phase. This is when we get a really nice spike of testosterone. This is when we are ovulating. This is a very powerful time for a woman. We are quite magnetic as just in nature. This is when everyone comes flocking to us because we know our power, and we have the communication and the confidence to be able to be heard exactly how we desire. So if there is something that you've been wanting to say to someone, your ovulation phase is the perfect time. And you really do have this energy resiliency. In fact, you're like quite magnetic at this time. This is our sweet spot. This is, if you are looking to date again, this is when you go on dates. This is when you say yes to the world, and the world will receive you the way you desire to be received. And that's a really important thing. After that ovulatory phase, we move into our longest phase, which is our luteal phase. The first phase of our luteal phase, we still have hormones peaking. Progesterone, it reaches its peak by day 21. We still have quite a high level of vitality at this point. So we can still start, we're now moving to the place where we're reviewing everything. So you're in reflection, you're trying to tie up loose ends, before your next menstrual shedding. You're in this reflective phase, but in that first early phase of the luteal phase, you still have quite a bit of energy. So you can still handle a lot. But that last week, when most people have PMS symptom expression happening, I really, see this differently now, but I'll say this. This is when your hormones, if implantation from pregnancy has not happened, then all of the signals are sent to your body that pregnancy is not happening, and all your hormones start to fall. It's in the falling where so much of what isn't working is revealed to you. Mm-hmm. So when I first became a naturopathic doctor, I had this rule. It was like, all signs of PMS bad, resolve every symptom. This is not okay. What do you need? B6, chase tree? How do we stop this? I now have this evolved wisdom of all right, this is your body. You have 540 periods approximately over your lifetime. Each one is revealing to you a moment of what is aligning or what is not aligning. And if we're not listening, what ends up happening is that quote unquote midlife crisis where we just burn it all down because the veil is off and we are tired. But your body is prompting you. If you're feeling really anxious or irritated or something is not working, your body is so wise. It's not because it's betraying you. It's actually because it wants to show you where you're out of harmony. And I now love a luteal phase. I don't love the symptom experience. I'm not saying that, but I love the wisdom encapsulated in your body speaking to you so profoundly. So as much as I am acutely aware of symptom management from a physical experience, I really, if we are meant to be in our luteal phase, closing things up and tying things in before our next menstrual phase, and you're feeling really agitated or you're feeling way overwhelmed or really exhausted because you're about to enter hibernation. This is the fall. Ovulation is summer. Follicular is spring. I didn't say that. Sorry. But in that luteal phase, if you're feeling really irritated, it is a beautiful time to start getting deeply curious about what is working and what isn't working. And I think the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. That's not mine. That's Tony Robbins. But it's true. If you were to ask yourself, instead of being like, why do I have this? And I'm so agitated. If you just said, what's not working for me right now? Is there something I said yes to that I should have said no? Is there too much happening right now? And you literally just let your body answer that question. You probably instantly feel better. And so I just think, sorry.
No, keep going.
I just think that is one of the best ways we can, to your point, and thanks for leading me the right direction. You're a great podcast host. One of the best ways we can get back into our divine feminine is to reclaim our power through our cycle wisdom, because then we start to recognize how much our body is already speaking to us, how wise it is. It is not betraying you. It is actually trying to show you the way. And because we live in a society that celebrates grind and pushing and building, when we get to this luteal phase, we feel like we're failing at life, but it's just your body trying to show you the way we were designed to thrive. And that's irritating when those two things aren't in integrity with each other. And that's all that's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I say this often and women kind of get upset about it, but I'm like, PMS is a gift. It can be a gift because exactly like you said, it is pointing a really angry arrow at what is not working. And part of getting back into your feminine is dropping out of your cerebral mind for a hot second, right? We think and brain our way through life. And part of tapping into the divine feminine is exactly what you said, like listening to your body, tapping into your intuition and seeing what guidance and advice is there for you, because it's often very, very different than what your mind or your kind of like cerebral part of you thinks you need to do. And the sooner you start listening to that like wise, deep internal voice of yours, that I think is where things really start to shift.
Well, this is why we feel so broken, right? Is like the conundrum of our time is that there's no woman out there who can't accomplish all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she gets it done. You want something done, give it to a busy woman. It's not a problem. That's why I love the discernment of the question. I'll say to women in my practice, how are you with stress? I'm fine.
Yeah.
How's your body? It's a fucking disaster. Right? It's like they know the effects of their body, but they can still produce. And so what you're talking about, and I love, that's why we love each other so much. But when we can reframe it this way and talk about your PMS being the gift, it is a gift. Those symptoms are literally your body's wisdom. They're the alarm signal of what's not working. And I really, this intuitive power is our superpower. And can I just go off and share something? Because I really want to say it. And I think it's important. Is like, it's the intuitive part of the feminine that I think became incredibly terrifying to the masculine dominant world. And I think this is gonna, if I haven't lost you yet, I'm about to lose you now. But if, I really think the reason why, you can say we burn the witches is that we learned how powerful women were, and it wasn't through physical force. And when that was figured out, we were like, okay, well, how about we have them turn on each other and we make them fear their power? And the thing that confirmed this to me, because I'm going to be really honest, there's still a huge part of me that's reconciling this and thinks that surrender is lazy. there's something called egg wisdom. Have you heard this, Sarah?
No, but I have goosebumps from what you're saying. So keep going.
Okay. This is what needs to be heard about feminine power and why we need to reclaim this and have this harmony within ourselves. There's something called egg wisdom. And I couldn't believe this when I heard it. I actually had to go look up the studies because I was like, get out of here. We're that powerful. Okay. So for all intensive purposes, when we ovulate, the egg is an X chromosome. So it's feminine in its essence. Can you agree with me on that?
Yes.
Okay. So here's why we need to reclaim surrender as our superpower. The egg, once it's ovulated, sits in the fallopian tube, okay? It doesn't go down the fallopian tube and looking for her mate in the uterus, like, has he texted? Has he called? Where is he? Where, right? That egg knows its power and she sits, okay? Now, get this. Not only does she trust that that what is meant for her will come to her, the magnetism we're talking about, she assesses. And when she can sense that there is sperm in the body through follicular fluid, she sends electromagnetic frequencies to that sperm. If she likes what she sees, she speeds them up through electromagnetic frequencies. If it is fit for her, she allows it to come to her sooner. If she does not like what she sees, she actually slows that sperm down. Now, when they arrive, it is the egg, it is the feminine essence that chooses which sperm gets to be reproduced, to enter. She chooses. That sperm enters, they create a barrier, no other sperm can enter. If she were to make the wrong mistake and anticipate incorrectly and that sperm was DNA damaged in any way, she then fixes the DNA damage before she cell replicates with that sperm.
This is wild.
She does that. And I use she intentionally because when we actually learn that the feminine power in her surrender is the power, of course we do when we don't trust ourselves. It was designed that way. Because then we wouldn't trust our own power and we would continue to look outside of ourselves instead of trusting that our intuitive wisdom is the way we literally create life. We are the generators of that. And we still shrink and apologize for wanting to surrender and rest. And it was all intentionally orchestrated, and you can take that however you want. I wouldn't call myself a feminist, but I do think that that is something that is really important to acknowledge, is that there is a lot of power to surrender, but we have called it weak. So we abandoned ourselves in the pursuit of being equal. We are equal. We are not the same.
Well, I can't think of a better way to just... I don't think there's anything else to be said after that. That was incredible. I love that. And I think it's so true that we have minimized ourselves, we have turned on each other, and we have paid the price. And I think a lot of us are waking up to the idea that the version of success and achievement that we were sold isn't actually working for a lot of us, and that there is such power in surrendering and tapping back into that divine feminine. So if you're still here, and I hope you are, let's fix our fatigue by surrendering and sitting in our egg wisdom. Thank you, Michelle, for being here. This was exactly the type of conversation I hoped and imagined that we would have. And I always appreciate you for bringing your full wild self and just speaking your truth. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I just want to say I love you and I'm really proud of you for doing this. And I think you do such important work and you're such an important voice. And I can't believe it took you this long to get a podcast, my friend. But congratulations.
Well, thank you. And if you want to hear more from Michelle, we're going to link to her in the show notes so that you can follow her. And if you are ready to tap into your divine feminine and you want to learn more about how to live more cyclically, check out Michelle's Cyclical Living Nutrition Guide. We will link to it in the show notes. And I think it would be a beautiful place for you to start your journey there. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for spending your precious time with me today. Remember, it takes a village or a podcast community to really make a dent in this fatigue epidemic. If today's episode resonated with you, do me a favor. Share it with a friend or two, and if you have a second, drop us that shiny 5-star review. It means so much to me. Are you eager to solve your own personal energy puzzle? Hop on over to fatiguefixer.ca/quiz and check out my fatigue fingerprint quiz. Let's pinpoint what's standing between you and feeling your best. A big thank you to Jen Hudson and Drew Gardner over at Story Studio Network for bringing these conversations to life. And hey, just so you know, I've got your back. Your fatigue, it's super real, and it's definitely not just all in your mind. I see you, and I believe you. Every 2 weeks, we'll keep these heart-to-hearts going, learning together and cheering each other on. Because between you and me, accepting perpetual exhaustion as the norm, that's not going to fly around here. See you back here in 2 weeks. Bye!